He only wanted a quiet refueling stop on a backwater world. Instead, he picked up a glowing alien sword, just to stop a killing blow, and accidentally proposed to a war-torn noblewoman in front of her entire people. He didn't know their laws. He didn't know her name. But now he's her husband by sacred tradition. And worse, she might be humanity's only hope of peace, if they both survive the month ahead. Rain fell hard on the gray dueling grounds of Kethalar, turning stone to slippery glass. Riker Voss, a human pilot with no patience for politics or ancient rituals, waited under an overhang near the landing pads. His ship needed repairs. That was all. Just a simple stop, some fuel, maybe a warm drink before heading off-world again. But the storm grounded all flights and the shouting drew his attention. He stepped closer to a crowd of tall, violet-skinned aliens. Their hair, long and silver, shimmered even under the dark sky. They stood in a tight circle, watching two fighters locked in fierce combat. One was a hulking male, his strikes brutal and relentless. The other, faster, smaller, moved with desperate grace. Her blade was beautiful, glowing faintly. She was clearly wounded, her dark suit torn, purple blood staining the ground. A voice beside Riker, old and gravelly, warned him not to interfere. "Clan business," the elder muttered. "Not for outsiders." Riker barely heard him. Something about the fight pulled at him. The woman, so outmatched yet still standing, refused to give up. Every movement screamed pain, but she didn't fall. Not until her enemy landed a crushing blow that knocked her to the ground, her sword skidding across the stone. Her fingers reached for it, trembling. Her opponent raised his own blade for the final strike, and Riker moved. He didn't think. He just acted. He pushed through the stunned crowd, ran to her side, and grabbed the fallen sword. The moment his hand closed around it, something strange happened. The blade felt warm. Alive, almost. Then came the clash. His arm shuddered from the impact as he blocked the killing blow, holding the sword between the noblewoman and death itself. Silence rippled through the crowd like a shockwave. The attacker stepped back, eyes wide. "This is not your fight, human. Seems unfair," Riker replied, breathing hard. "Killing someone already down." Behind him, the woman coughed, then whispered hoarsely, "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Before Riker could answer, the elder who had warned him earlier stepped forward, now flanked by others in ceremonial robes. All eyes were on the human with the glowing sword. "The blade has been claimed," the elder declared. "By ancient law, he who wields the clan's sword in defense of its heir becomes her husband." Riker blinked. "Wait. What?" "You are now bound," the elder continued, "by honor, by blood. You are Clan Invar's husband." Riker looked at the woman he had just saved. She stared back at him, torn between fury and disbelief. "I was just trying to help," he said weakly. "You've ruined everything," she whispered, dragging herself upright. "You bound yourself to a dying clan on a planet you don't even understand. The blade chose you. There's no undoing this." He glanced at the crowd, now murmuring with a mix of awe and outrage. Dozens of alien eyes stared at him. Riker had faced pirates, bounty, hunters, wild beasts, but nothing prepared him for this. What was supposed to be a refueling stop had turned into a wedding, without flowers, without cake, just blood, rain, and a glowing sword. And a stranger, beautiful, bleeding, and furious, now calling him husband. He ran a hand through his wet hair. "Well," he muttered to himself, "this is going to be one hell of a story." She turned to leave, limping but proud. "Follow me, human. The elders will want to see the fool who ruined a lifetime of planning in one heartbeat." "I've been called worse," Riker replied, stepping after her. The dueling grounds faded. Behind them, the rain still falling. He didn't know it yet, but that one impulsive choice would change not just his life, but the fate of an entire world. Riker followed her through the wet stone corridors, trying not to slip. The sword still hung awkwardly in his hand, heavy, glowing slightly like it was watching him. The noblewoman, Lorathi, he learned her name only when someone bowed and addressed her formally, walked with a limp but never slowed. She didn't look back at him once. He couldn't stop staring at her. Not just because she was alien beautiful in that tall, silver-haired, violet-skinned way, but because every step she took screamed pride and pain. She'd just been humiliated in front of her people. Her enemy almost killed her. And then he, some idiot from Earth, had stepped in and made it worse. Inside the mountain fortress, guards stared at him like he was dirt beneath their boots. The elders looked both horrified and oddly amused. One even chuckled when he walked in. "This," the high elder said, peering down at him from a curved dais, "is the one who wielded the blade?" "I didn't know," Riker began, lifting, his hands in surrender. "She was about to die. Where I'm from, we step in when someone's about to be murdered," the room murmured. Some curious, some angry. "The blade does not care about your world," another elder said coldly. "It cares about lineage, honor, compatibility." Compatibility? Riker blinked. Like romantic compatibility? Lorathi let out a sharp breath like a laugh she didn't want to admit. "The blade would not have accepted you," the high elder said, ignoring the humor, "if you were not genetically viable. The bond is not symbolic, it is biological. Sacred. So I'm... what? Accidentally married? You are the last hope of Clan Invar," Lorathi said suddenly. Her voice was calm, but her eyes burned. "You stepped in. You held the sword. You didn't just interrupt a duel. You became part of a war you don't understand." "That's not fair," he replied. "I didn't ask for this. Neither did I." That shut him up. They stood there in silence, in front of a dozen alien leaders and twice as many guards bound by ancient law neither of them wanted to believe in. But the blade glowed softly at Riker's side, as if it had already decided. Later, they stood in her clan's old war room, a place full of dust and forgotten banners. Riker noticed how empty it felt. The once mighty Clan Invar had fallen hard. "Not a noble," Riker said, breaking the silence. "I'm a freelance pilot, smuggler sometimes. I've done jobs for mining companies, escorted cargo ships, chased off raiders. I'm not the kind of guy who marries royalty and starts sword fighting for honor." Lorathi sat at the edge of the long stone table. Her leg was bandaged, her armor peeled off to reveal dark bruises. She watched him like someone sizing up a weapon. "I didn't expect a hero," she said, "but the blade saw something. It never lies." "Yeah, well, I've had knives lie to me before," Riker muttered. "Usually while stuck in my ribs." That earned a flicker of a smile. "You're going to have to train," she said finally. "Learn our ways, our laws. If you fail, the bond will be dissolved, and my clan will lose its last claim. Dreher will take everything." "Is that the guy? With the big sword and bigger ego?" "That's the one," Riker sighed. "Let me guess, he's not gonna like me much. He already wants you dead." Awesome. And so it began. The next days were brutal. Combat drills at dawn, history lessons at noon, etiquette practice, where Riker had to remember which hand gesture meant peace and which one meant prepare to duel to the death. Lorathi was everywhere, pushing him, testing him, saving him from embarrassing mistakes. She taught with the patience of a commander and the fury of someone with everything to lose. And Riker, despite grumbling, despite sore muscles and cultural whiplash, began to adapt. He was good with his hands, always had been. Weapons were just tools, muscle memory, timing. And Lorathi, for all her cold distance, was a brilliant teacher. Still, not everyone wanted him there. Guards muttered insults under their breath. Servants stared at him like a zoo animal. Even the fortress AI refused to open certain doors until Lorathi gave special permission. Then came the announcement. Dreher had challenged the bond publicly. "If the human wishes to remain," he declared before the gathered clans, "let him face the trial of 3. Let him prove he is worthy to hold the blade and the woman it protects." Gasps, shouts. One elder fainted. No outsider had ever taken the trial. No human had ever even touched a clan blade before Riker. He looked at Lorathi. She shook her head slightly, warning him, but something had changed in him. Riker wasn't the kind of man who walked away from a fight. "I accept," he said loudly. The room exploded. Back in their shared quarters, Lorathi nearly threw a vase at his head. "You don't understand what you've agreed to," she hissed. "These trials are not for show. They break warriors who have trained since birth." "Well," Riker said, rubbing the back of his neck, "I guess you'll just have to train me harder." She stared at him, furious, confused, a little impressed. Then, she turned away, her voice softer. "You're risking your life for a people who will never see you as one of them." Riker walked over, standing beside her. "I'm risking it for you," he said simply. She didn't reply. But for the first time, she didn't step away. That night, as storms raged over the mountain, Riker lay awake in the dark. He heard her, breathing across the room, steady, strong. He didn't know if he would survive the trial. He didn't know if the clan would ever accept him, but he knew this much. He hadn't come here looking for a fight, but now that he was in one, he wasn't going to lose, not to Dreher, not to fear, and definitely not to a talking sword with attitude. The next morning, Riker Voss stood shirtless in the courtyard, drenched in sweat, swinging a weighted training blade under Lorathi's watchful eye. His muscles ached, his arms trembled, but he didn't stop. "Again," she said, voice firm. He swung. Again. He groaned but obeyed. Lorathi crossed her arms, trying not to show the tiny flicker of pride in her eyes. Just days ago, this man had barely known which end of the blade to hold. Now, he was learning to move like a Keth. Valyrian, not perfect, not smooth, but fierce. Still, time was short. The trial of 3 was only a few days away. And Riker? He was still far from ready. After the morning drills came the culture lessons. Riker sat cross-legged on a cold stone floor as an elderly scholar spoke for hours about clan history, traditions, and sacred law. The language was thick. The rules were endless. Do not bow with your left hand in formal settings. It's considered a challenge. Eating before the elders finish their meal is dishonor. Never turn your back on a banner unless given leave. Riker's head throbbed. "Why does everything sound like an insult if you tilt your head the wrong way?" he asked. "Because it is," the scholar said dryly. By the 3rd day, he was bruised, exhausted, and beginning to question everything. "What if I fail?" he asked Lorathi one night as they sat by the fire in the old war hall. "What happens then?" She was quiet for a moment. "If you fail, the bond is broken," she said at last. Clan Invar loses its last land. Its name is removed from the council records. My father's legacy, gone. Forever. He looked at her. The firelight danced in her silver eyes. "And what happens to you?" "I become a symbol of shame," she said quietly. "No one will speak my name again. I will not be allowed to fight, to lead, or to bear a child." Riker's chest tightened. "I'm not letting that happen," he said. But deep down, he was afraid. Not of the combat. He could handle bruises. Not of the culture. He could memorize rules. No, what scared him was that the more time he spent with her, the more she mattered. And that meant failure wasn't just about survival anymore. That night, he dreamed of the blade. It floated in darkness, glowing faintly. Voices echoed around him, some human, some alien. They whispered strange words he didn't understand, and one voice, clearer than the rest, called his name. Riker. He opened his eyes, heart racing. Lorathi stood by the window, wrapped in a long ceremonial robe, her hair loose. The moonlight made her glow. "Another nightmare?" she asked softly. "Just weird dreams," he replied, sitting up. She hesitated, then came to sit beside him on the edge of the bed. "I used to have them too, after my father was poisoned. I'd see him every night, telling me I had to fix everything, that I had to be stronger, smarter, faster. Riker looked at her. Really looked. How did you deal with that? I didn't, she said. I buried it. Until the day I picked up the blade and challenged Dreyer. She glanced at him, her voice lower now. I didn't expect to survive that fight. I knew he was stronger, but I couldn't let our name die in silence. If I was going to fall, I wanted to fall loudly. Riker smiled. You've got a talent for that. Her lip twitched. So do you, apparently. You crashed into my life like a meteor and left nothing standing. Yeah, I do that sometimes. They sat in silence, the air between them growing warmer. Not romantic. Not yet. But something was changing. Slowly. Carefully. A knock broke the moment. A young guard entered, breathless. Dreyer has called for a public council session. Tonight. Lorathi stood. He's making his next move. Riker rose, already pulling on his jacket. Let's go ruin his plans. The council chamber was packed. Elders, warriors, clan leaders, all gathered under the ancient crystal dome that shimmered with stormlight. Dreyer stood at the center, arms folded, armored in red and silver. He oozed confidence. This outsider, Dreyer began, has no right to the blade, no place among us. He cannot possibly complete the trial, and so I propose a formal test, a final judgment. He turned slowly, facing the High Elder. If he fails, Clan Invar is dissolved, but if he wins, I will step down as head of Clan Keth. Gasps. Even Lorathi stiffened. He's bluffing, Riker muttered. He wouldn't bet his title unless he thought I'd lose. The High Elder nodded. Very well. The challenge stands. Dreyer smirked. Lorathi leaned close to Riker, her voice tight. He's just raised the stakes. Now your failure doesn't just destroy my clan, it shifts power across the whole world. Perfect, Riker muttered, no pressure. After the council, back in the training hall, Lorathi threw a blade at him. He barely dodged it. You could die, Riker, she shouted. Nice to see your motivational style hasn't changed. She threw another. He caught it this time. I don't want you to die, she said, voice shaking. Riker stared at her. That was the first time she'd said anything that wasn't about duty, law, or survival. I'm not planning to, he replied. She walked up to him close now. Too close. Her voice dropped to a whisper. You've changed everything. My plans, my fate, the way I see the world, and I hate that. He tilted his head. Why? Because it means I have something to lose again. He touched her arm gently. Then we protect it. Together. She stared at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. And finally, just before leaving the room, she whispered one word. Together. The trial was coming. The clock was ticking. And for the first time, Riker Voss wasn't just fighting to survive. He was fighting for someone else. The sun rose cold and pale over Kethalar's mountain peaks. The sky was blood orange, as if it too knew something serious was coming. Down in the ancient stone arena, the trial of three was about to begin. Riker stood alone in the combat circle, adjusting the bracers on his forearms. The armor was ceremonial, deep, purple cloth and silver-threaded plates molded to fit his broader human build, but it felt strange on him, heavy in more ways than just weight. Lorathi stood at the edge of the arena. She was dressed in her clan's formal warrior robes, the color of storm clouds, her silver hair braided tightly. She was calm, but Riker could see the tension in her jaw, the stillness in her hands. She didn't blink. You remember what I told you? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Don't fight like a human, he said, rolling his neck. Fight like me. A small smile touched her lips. Exactly. A deep horn echoed across the stone, and the crowd of watching clan leaders and citizens fell silent. The High Elder stepped forward. First trial, combat. From the opposite end of the arena, Dreyer's champion emerged. He was massive, easily, a head taller than Riker, with broad shoulders and 4 gleaming black eyes. His name was Korax, known across the clans as the Breaker of Blades. He wore no helmet, just a long red scar across his cheek and a smile that promised pain. "Do you bleed red?" Korax asked calmly, stretching his arms. "Want to find out?" Riker replied, gripping his blade. The crowd tensed. Then the horn blew, and the fight began. Korax was fast, much faster than Riker expected. The alien, warrior's strikes came in blurs, blades singing as they sliced through the air. Riker dodged, blocked, rolled, barely staying on his feet. He took a cut across the ribs early. Sharp pain, wet heat, blood trickled down his side. The crowd gasped at the sight of red. Dreyer stood from his seat, arms folded, satisfied. But Riker didn't stop. He remembered Lorathi's lessons. Keth warriors relied on rhythm, precision, formal patterns. So he broke the rhythm. He fought dirty. He ducked under a strike and slammed his head into Korax's nose with a loud crack. The crowd roared, not in outrage, but shock. Korax stumbled, stunned. Riker pressed the advantage, twisting, sweeping, the alien's legs with a low move that no Valyrian warrior would use. He fought like a street brawler, like a man who'd learned to survive in dirty alleyways and pirate strongholds. The blade clashed again and again. Blood spilled, dust rose, and after nearly 20 minutes of brutal combat, Riker flipped Korax over his shoulder and drove his blade to the warrior's throat. Korax blinked up at him, breathing hard. "I yield," he said at last, "to the human." The arena exploded in noise. Lorathi released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Her fists clenched tight, then slowly opened. Riker walked back to her, limping, bleeding, but grinning. "Round 1, he said. "Not bad, right?" She touched his arm gently. "You surprised even me." "Good," he said, wincing. "I like keeping people guessing." But the second trial loomed. Mental strength. At midday, Riker was led into the sacred archive hall, lined with glowing scrolls and memory stones. 3 elders waited, along with Dreyer, seated like a vulture, with too many teeth. A board was brought out, a game of strategy sacred to the Keth Valyrians, a test of wit, memory, and understanding of their complex, ruthless politics. Riker sat opposite a silent old master named Syrel, who had not spoken in 30 years and had never lost a match. The room was still. The game began. Riker started slow, fumbling. His moves were cautious, unsure. Dreyer smirked. One elder shook, his head. But then Riker stopped. He leaned back in his chair. Eyes narrowed, and everything changed. He remembered the lessons, not just the rules, but the patterns, the ways of thinking, the unspoken rules of power in Valyrian society. Every clan's rise and fall, every betrayal, every alliance. He wasn't a master, but he'd seen this kind of game before, on Earth, in backroom deals, in mercenary contracts, in cold, calculated risks. Riker's fingers moved faster now. He bluffed, sacrificed pieces, lured Syrel into traps. The elders leaned forward. Syrel narrowed his eyes, then moved. Bold, dangerous. Riker smiled and countered with a move so aggressive, so human, it flipped the board's entire strategy. 5 moves later, Syrel stared down at his defeat. The room erupted again. Even, Dreyer's smirk disappeared. "Second trial passed," the High Elder said. Riker stood, wiping his hands. "2 down," he said to Lorathi, who stood waiting at the door. "Ready for the hard one?" Her expression turned serious. The final trial was different. There would be no crowds, no elders, no Dreyer, just Riker, and the ancestral blade. He knelt alone in the sacred chamber, lit only by a shaft of silver moonlight. The transformed blade lay on a black altar, glowing softly. It no longer looked fully Keth-Valerian. New etchings had appeared, subtle human curves like Earth script woven into ancient alien lines. He reached out and placed both hands on the hilt. Everything went dark. Then, flashes of light. Fire. Screams. He was flying through memories that weren't his. Ancient battles. Lost love. Sacrifices. He saw Lorathi's father, standing proud, falling in betrayal. A poisoned goblet. He saw generations of warriors, some victorious, others broken. Then, a new image. A child. A tiny boy with pale violet skin, silver white eyes that looked almost human. In the vision, Riker stood behind him, Lorathi beside him. A voice spoke in the dark, deep, familiar. "You carry the heart this line has waited for." The light returned. Riker collapsed to his knees, gasping. The blade hovered above him, floating, glowing brighter than ever. It had chosen, not just as a weapon, not just as a ritual, but as a witness. When he returned to the surface, Lorathi ran to him. "What did you see?" Riker stood slowly. The blade hovered into his hand like it belonged there. "I saw your ancestors," he said, "and I saw our son." She froze. "What?" He nodded. "Someday, if we survive this, if we fight together, that child will change everything." Her voice trembled. "You believe it?" "I know. It." And in that moment, something between them broke open. Not a kiss, not a promise, but a beginning. And outside the chamber, Dreyer waited, more furious than ever. Because Riker Voss had passed the final trial, and now the outsider was no longer an outsider. He was the future. The storm came back that night, thick, angry clouds rolling over the peaks like war drums. Lightning cracked above the fortress as the blade, now fully awakened and bound to Riker, rested in the sacred chamber beside its new bearer. The air inside Clan Invar's stronghold was different now, heavier, electric. Riker Voss had completed the trial of 3. By law, by blood, by the will of the ancestors, he was no longer just a man who stumbled into a ritual duel. He was now officially bonded to Lorathi Invar, rightful heir of her fallen clan. He was a clan husband, and to many, a problem. Some saw him as a savior, others as a threat, but none could ignore him anymore. Especially not Dreyer Keth. That same night, Riker stood in the old war hall again, this time not as an outsider or student, but as a warrior. As Lorathi's chosen partner. The fire crackled beside him, and his wounds from the trials had been cleaned and bandaged, though they still ached. Lorathi entered silently, her long robe trailing behind her, shadows brushing across her face. "You did what no outsider ever has," she said, walking toward him. "Even I doubted you." "I didn't," Riker said with a weak smile. "Well, not all the time." She stopped in front of him, searching his face. "The blade showed me something," he said softly. "A child, ours, born of Earth and Kethalar." Her breath caught. "You saw him too?" Their eyes met. The silence between them was no longer tense. It was full, electric. "I don't know what that vision means," she whispered, "but I know what I want it to mean." Before Riker could respond, the doors burst open. Korax, the champion Riker had defeated, entered, flanked by 2 Invar warriors. His face was pale, alarmed. "The Council," he said quickly. "They're meeting." Dreyer called for an emergency session. "At this hour?" Lorathi asked, stepping forward. "He's claiming the bond is unnatural," Korax said, voice low. "He brought a scroll, some prophecy. Said the child of human and Keth blood would signal the end of our world." Riker blinked. "Wait, the child?" Korax nodded. "He knows about the vision. Or he suspects. He's using fear now." Lorathi looked between them. If he can convince the council your bond with me endangers tradition, he can force a review. And if they rule in his favor, he takes everything, Riker said grimly. Lorathi nodded once. We have to go, now. The council chamber was buzzing when they arrived. Not in excitement, but dread. Elder after elder whispered among themselves, eyes flicking toward Riker as if he were a walking disaster. Dreyer stood at the center again, red ceremonial robes, hanging heavy on his massive frame. This, he said, holding up an old scroll, was found in the deepest vaults beneath the citadel of memory. It speaks of the Starborn Union, a bond between an outsider and a Valyrian heir. It speaks of a child born from two bloods, and it speaks of collapse, of fire, of the end of our traditions. Gasps rippled through the chamber. It is clear, now, Dreyer continued. This human is not a savior. He is the blade that will cut the roots of our way of life. Riker stepped forward. And what does the rest of the scroll say, Dreyer? Because I know your type. You like power. You like control. You love tradition when it benefits you. Murmurs. A few elders looked at Dreyer now, not with support, but curiosity. The High Elder held up a hand. Let the human speak. Riker looked out at them, meeting their eyes. All of them. Where I come from, he said, we value choice. Not destiny, not bloodlines, but choice. I didn't choose to pick up that blade, but I did choose to stay, to fight, to risk everything for a woman I didn't know because I believed her life was worth saving. He turned toward Lorathi now. Her gaze didn't waver. And I choose her again. Every day. With every breath. A deep silence fell. Then the High Elder spoke again. There is a second half to the scroll. Dreyer did not read it. It does not speak of collapse, it speaks of rebirth. Of the child uniting the clans, not breaking them. Riker felt Lorathi's hand slip into his. Dreyer's face twisted with rage. I will not see our world handed to an offspring of Earth. You don't have a choice, Korarak snapped, stepping forward. You lost, he passed the trials, he earned the blade. I challenge the prophecy itself, Dreyer roared. The child does not even exist. And that's when Lorathi stepped forward, voice calm, hands resting on her belly. You're wrong. The silence was complete. I carry the child of Riker Voss, she said. Our son. He lives. Now. The chamber exploded. Voices shouting, elders rising, some shocked, some overjoyed, others furious. Dreyer turned red. His hands clenched. This is an abomination. No, Riker growled, stepping in front of Lorathi. This is hope. But in the chaos, Riker saw it, the flicker of desperation in Dreyer's eyes. The way he glanced at his guards, the tightening of his posture. He wasn't done. Back in their private quarters, guards were doubled, windows sealed. Riker paced. He's going to make a move, he said. Lorathi sat in a chair, hand over, her stomach. Then we'll be ready. He won't wait long. She nodded. Then neither will we. They spent that night writing messages to allies, to Clan Thal, to the lesser houses who had once supported Invar, to Korarak's own kin. By morning they had a coalition. And Dreyer? He had a deadline. That same morning, as Riker stood watching the sky from the western tower, Lorathi joined him in silence. He'll come for the child, she said. He'll try to paint it as mercy, tradition, a return to balance. Then we make sure the clans see the truth before he does, Riker said. We bring them here. Let them witness our bond. Let them see that our son isn't the end of anything. He's the beginning, Lorathi said softly. She turned to him, face illuminated by the morning light. And you are not the outsider anymore, Riker Voss. He smiled. Guess I'd better start acting like a husband then. As the mountain winds howled and drums began to sound in the valley, it became clear. The real battle wasn't over swords or rituals anymore. It was over the future, and Riker, once just a wandering pilot, was now standing in its center, armed not just with steel but with love, courage, and the weight of an unborn legacy that could unite a fractured world. He had passed the trials. Now came the war for what came after. The wind howled down the mountain like a warning. Storm banners snapped high above Clan Invar's stronghold as tension thickened in every hallway and corridor. Kethalar was quiet, but not the peaceful kind. It was the stillness that comes before something breaks. Riker Voss stood alone in the blade chamber, staring at the ancient sword resting on its altar. The blade shimmered with soft blue light, alien and beautiful, but now undeniably his. Etchings from both worlds coiled along its edges. Valyrian tradition had never seen anything like it. Neither had Riker. He wasn't a warrior by birth, not a politician, not a noble, but the blade had chosen him. The people were watching him, and now, the unborn child he hadn't expected to want was depending on him. He reached out and touched the sword. It hummed, not with violence, but with intention, as if it were reminding him. This was never just about survival. It was about change. Behind him, the doors opened. Lorathi entered slowly, dressed in full clan regalia, armor laced with ancestral silver, her hair coiled like stormlight, her eyes sharper than any blade. "You're awake early," she said softly. "Didn't sleep," Riker replied. "I didn't expect you to." She walked beside him. They looked down at the blade together, the silence between them no longer uncomfortable. "Just full." "He's coming, isn't he?" Riker asked. "Dreyer." Lorathi nodded once. "Scouts say his forces are mobilizing, not just loyal warriors, mercenaries, deserters, even black market tech from the outer moons. Bringing guns to a prophecy fight," Riker muttered. "Classy. He's desperate. Your victory in the trials humiliated him. The prophecy frightens him. But our child, that terrifies him." Riker turned to her. "And what about you?" She looked at him for a long moment. "I'm afraid too," she admitted. "But not of him." "Of what then?" She hesitated, her voice barely above a whisper. "Of losing you." Riker's heart stuttered. Lorathi, who had once called him a fool, now looked at him like he was the only steady thing left in a crumbling world. "I didn't mean to care," she said. "Not at first. You were loud, strange, human." Riker chuckled softly. "Still am. But now, when I think of what's coming, I realize I'm not just fighting for my clan, or even my child." She reached up, brushing her fingers lightly over his chest, just above the heart. "I'm fighting for us." He didn't kiss her. Not yet. But his hand closed over hers. "And I'm not going anywhere," he said quietly. "Not without a fight." Later that day, the High Council called a special gathering. The chamber was full. Elders, warriors, civilians, even skeptical clan leaders who had refused to take sides. The mood was tense, a mix of fear, hope, and thinly veiled dread. Riker stood with Lorathi at the center platform. Korarak stood to his right, clad in battle armor, now a sworn ally of Clan Invar. To his left, the emissary of Clan Thal, a wise, silent woman named Felshan, watched with open curiosity. Dreyer entered last. He didn't bow, didn't speak, just stood at the opposite end, flanked by crimson-armored soldiers and black-cloaked strangers. Their eyes were cold, empty. Dreyer's voice thundered through the hall. "The child must be surrendered," gasps, murmurs. Dreyer raised his hand. "This aberration growing inside a half-fallen noble and a genetic outsider is not a gift. It is a weapon, a curse that will unmake our traditions, and I, for one, will not bow to fate." Lorathi stepped forward. "Then fight it," she said, calm but lethal. "But do it with truth, not fear. You want to erase the prophecy because it doesn't favor you, but the blade chose Riker. The trials confirmed him. The clans rallied. And the child exists. She placed her hand over her stomach. A soft glow pulsed under her palm. The blade has begun responding to the child's presence, she said. It glows near him, as if recognizing its heir. The High Elder, silent until now, stood. If Dreher challenges the prophecy, she said, he must do so through honorable combat, not through shadows, not with mercenaries. We will not allow civil war over a child. But Dreher only smiled. I do not declare war, High Elder, he said smoothly. I provoke it. He clapped his hands twice. From the back of the chamber, doors burst open. A half-dozen cloaked figures stormed in, silent, armed, eyes glowing faintly from neural enhancers. Not warriors, assassins. The crowd screamed. Elders scrambled back. Lorathi pulled a dagger. Korax raised his sword. Riker moved without thinking. He drew the clan blade and stepped in front of Lorathi, just as the first assassin struck. The clash rang like a gong through the sacred hall. He fought hard, fast, untrained in their style, but efficient. Human fast-twitch instincts meeting alien precision. Korax blocked the second assassin. Lorathi stabbed the third through the thigh, disabling him. One tried to flank Riker. He spun, caught the attacker's arm, and drove an elbow into their throat. They collapsed, and suddenly, it was over. Dreher's assassins lay groaning on the stone floor. The blade glowed hot in Riker's grip. The High Elder's voice cracked like thunder. Dreher Keth, you have violated sacred peace. You have spilled blood in the council chamber. Your honor is broken. But Dreher didn't retreat. Instead, he shouted to his remaining loyalists, prepare the siege. He turned and stormed from the hall. Outside, horns began to sound across the valley. The siege had begun. The clans split. Some fled. Others pledged their banners to Lorathi. Many, confused or frightened, waited. Inside the fortress, Riker gathered weapons. Korax formed a war council. The High Elder activated ancient defenses in the fortress walls. Lorathi coordinated, with Clan Thal, arranging emergency transport for civilians. At midnight, Riker found her alone in the nursery wing, where the child's cradle had already been built from wood and silver. She stared at it. He's not even born, she said, quietly, but the world is already trying to kill him. Riker stepped beside her. Let them try. He placed his hand over hers. We'll protect him, together. And outside, under the storming sky of Cathalar, Dreher's armies gathered like a wave, preparing to crash, but inside those walls, Riker and Lorathi stood together, not just as husband and wife, not just as parents-to-be, but as the last defenders of a future no one saw coming, a future written in prophecy, and chosen by a blade older than memory. The final battle was coming, and this time, Riker wasn't fighting for honor. He was fighting for everything. The storm didn't stop for 3 days. The skies above Cathalar wept fire and rain as Dreher's forces surrounded the mountain fortress of Clan Invar. Thunder cracked like war drums. Distant flashes lit the valley where tents, tanks and troop lines stretched as far as the eye could see. It was a siege by every definition, strategic, political, and deeply personal. Inside the stronghold, Riker Voss didn't sleep. He stood atop the battlements with a pair of high-powered binoculars, scanning the enemy formations. They were disciplined, efficient, but they didn't know the terrain like he did now, and they didn't have what he had. They didn't have her. Lorathi stood beside him in full war garb, her armor laced with symbols of both House Invar and the unborn legacy she carried. The child inside her, already stirring with unusual energy, had become more than just a symbol. He was the future written in the prophecy, the bridge between two peoples, the flame Dreher wanted to extinguish before it could burn too brightly. He'll strike at dawn, she said. Riker nodded. He wants the drama, victory and morning light. Then we make him regret waiting. The War Council gathered below. Korax drew lines on a digital map with firm, calloused fingers. Dreyer's left flank is weakest, overconfident. All his strength is in his center. He wants to march straight up the mountain and break through the front gate. Let him. Try, Riker said. We give him what he wants and bleed him for every step. Korax grinned. You're thinking like one of us now, human. I'm thinking like a guy with everything to lose, Riker replied. That night, Riker visited the sacred chamber one last time. The blade was already waiting, its glow brighter now, almost alive. When he touched it, a warm pulse moved up his arm, into his chest. The sword had never felt so light, so ready. He left the chamber in silence, and found Lorathi in the nursery again, seated beside the half-carved cradle. She wasn't resting. She couldn't. Her hand moved slowly across the wooden edge, tracing ancient runes meant to bless newborns. He walked up behind her and placed his hands on her shoulders. We'll protect him, he whispered. I know, she said. But if something happens... Don't, he interrupted gently. We're both walking out of this. She turned, her eyes reflecting silver in the dim light. I never wanted to love again, Riker. Not after my father. Not after everything. I lost. He smiled softly, cupping her cheek. Too bad. You're stuck with me now. They kissed, long and quiet. Not desperate, not rushed, just full of meaning. Two warriors. Two people from opposite stars choosing each other in a galaxy full of war. When dawn broke, the sky turned red, just as Dreyer marched. The first wave slammed into the outer defenses. Clan Invar's allies, warriors from Clan Thal, rebel factions, even former Keth elites disillusioned with Dreyer's reign, rose like a wall of fury. Riker fought at the front, the ancestral blade singing in his hands. It moved like it had a mind of its own, cutting, blocking, guiding his strikes. He fought not like a Keth Valyrian, not like a human, but like something new, something more. Beside him, Korax fought with unmatched grace, bellowing war chants that had not been heard in generations. The two moved together like fire and steel, and behind them, Lorathi commanded. Sharp, strategic, fearless. She moved, her units like chess pieces, guiding them around Dreyer's formations, carving cracks into his lines. The siege lasted hours. Then Dreyer himself arrived at the gate. Clad in black armor, taller than any man on the field, he strode forward with a double-bladed spear forged from forbidden alloys. Blood stained his arms. His eyes burned with fury. I demand single combat, he roared. To end this, you and me, human. Riker stepped forward without hesitation. No tricks, no backup, he said. Just us. They met in the blood-slicked courtyard, watched by hundreds. The two men who had defined the fate of this planet. The duel was brutal. Dreyer fought like a beast. No finesse, just rage and power. He wanted to crush Riker, to end him and everything he stood for. But Riker fought, with purpose, for Lorathi, for their unborn son, for every house that had ever been silenced by power. He fought with the will of Earth and the blessing of Valyrian ancestors. And finally, when the moment came, he disarmed Dreyer with a twist of the blade and drove the sword into the earth beside his enemy's throat. I could kill you, Riker said, panting, but I'm not like you. He stood and turned to the crowd. Let the old world end. Let a new one begin.